checking the audio and things. So, Jill Hindmarsh from Sykes Accountants, and she's going to talk to us today about can't pay, won't pay. Now, when we were talking earlier, Jill, you were saying one of the problems with small businesses is they can, even if they are making money and making a profit, if they don't have the cash, it can cause a lot of problems. So.
That's right, yeah. Cash flow is important, even as important as making profit. And businesses always need to have cash to pay their suppliers, their expenses. And if you're not getting the cash in to cover that, then you really are going to have problems trading.
So what's the most important thing to make sure that people get their cash in on time?
We mentioned before about terms and conditions. So that's the first thing. That if customers don't know when they're expected to pay, the chances are they'll take as long as they would like to. So it is important early in a relationship to make sure they understand when you're expecting payment. And then the next thing to do is to have something in place to make sure that you keep on top of that. So if your terms and conditions say payment in 30 days, that when 30 days are up, that if you haven't had the money in, that you then start trying to get the money in. So whatever system you're comfortable with, you need to have some system in place and need to keep revisiting it. So have a habit of checking that regularly.
So when somebody's starting out in business, or if they already have a business, what would you say are the sort of first time that you would say to someone when you're expecting payment?
If the payment terms is something like 30 days, you're going to maybe give them approaching the 30 days before you start saying anything. But I think as soon as you can after that 30 days, if they haven't been paid, then you do need to start asking where the money is. Not 60 days, but after the 30 days is up.
So when I think one of the problems with small businesses is it all becomes a bit awkward for people, and they sometimes think, when do I say to them when I expect payment? Should I say it right at the start, or should I say it when I send the invoice? When should I actually mention it?
Yeah, I think it is quite a difficult thing for people to address. It's not something people are generally comfortable with. And if you've never been in a position like that where you need to ask people for money, it can be quite awkward. But having the conditions up front to start with, again, that helps. So whether that's in a contract, whether that's a terms and conditions document, or whether it's just on the invoice, or something there up front that says what you expect.
I suppose it's probably better almost before you do the invoice, when you're agreeing the order, to sort of say, well, normally we expect to be paid on invoice, because otherwise the person might go, well, if I've got 30 days, and then you get the bill and think, oh gosh, I'll have to take money out the savings, and that's going to take me a while or something. So
that's right.
What sort of firms would expect money on invoice?
Say, for example, we ourselves do. It'd probably be more service industries that would expect that, because our biggest cost is our wages, and we've already paid them.
Yeah. What about deposits and things? Is that something that you say, well, we expect a deposit if you're having to buy things for a particular order?
Again, it will depend on the business. And I think that's probably more likely in something like, for example, a building project. It's coming to build your own conservatory. And it's going to be quite a bit of money. You're more likely to say, 20% up front, 40% up front, whatever your policy is.
Yeah, I think we used to do that with books, because most of the cost of the books was before you actually delivered it. And then it also gives you kind of a lever if you want the money back. So we always kind of had, well, once the artwork's, once you've approved the first proof, you pay a third. And then once you approve the, going to be bound, you pay another third, and then you pay the final lot before we deliver, and you're happy with it.
But, and then as a contrast to that, if you're perhaps producing an item that you're selling £10, £20, something like that, you're more likely to provide it straight up, expect it at the end, but it's on delivery or just before delivery, something like that. Yeah. So it's going to depend a lot on the business.
Yeah, and I think a lot of businesses as well expect 30 days in business, whereas consumers, usually expect to pay for it when they get it, don't they?
That's right. I think that's true. I think the bigger the companies are, the more power they tend to have, and the more they'll take as long as they like to pay.
Because I know
30 days, someone say 60.
Yeah, some of the big companies are just, well, we pay on, on the statement or something. Exactly. So you were saying that you should wait to the 30 days. Do you think that they should have a routine kind of chasing system, or just chase people that don't pay, or send out statements to everybody, or what do you recommend?
Yeah. Again, it will depend on the business, but for a lot of businesses, statements are a good idea. Mm-hmm. And if you have accounting software, you should be able to generate those statements without too much difficulty. Mm-hmm. If nothing else, it's a reminder to the person that they need to pay. Mm-hmm. So yes, a statement's a good idea. If it's not appropriate to your business, decide what is appropriate. And if 30 days, if that's your agreed terms and haven't paid in the 30 days, then you need something to remind you to start chasing that. Mm-hmm. You need some sort of system, some sort of routine.
So what kind of systems are there, or what would you recommend?
For example, we ourselves use Sage, mm-hmm. and that does allow you to put payment dates in when you raise an invoice. Mm-hmm. So something will actually prompt you to do that. Mm-hmm. This hasn't been paid, you need to start chasing it. Yeah. So from our point of view, that's how we would start that process and start to chase for the money. I think some people might just have diary notes or a calendar, just something with reminders in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can do those free or for very little money, can't you?
Yeah. So it's because we use Xero, which is an online one, and that actually, you can set it up to send out automatic reminders to people, or you can say, for each customer, you can set it so somebody is always slow to pay. You always start sending out the reminders sooner. But if it's somebody that usually pays fairly quickly, I would send a different sort of reminder. So because I think it's always interesting, isn't it? How some people, you kind of know they need to be told more forcefully. But I think
these sort of things that will come by experience.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are worried about upsetting their customer, and that's why they don't chase until they're really mad about it, and then they go in very angry, and that does cause a lot of problems.
That's absolutely true. I think in general we are nice people, and we don't like confrontation, and we don't like those difficult conversations. One thing that we do is we have somebody separate from the people doing the work. We have a credit control person. So that's wonderful for me, because it doesn't affect my relationship with my clients, mm-hmm. because I'm not the person who's having to chase the money. It's somebody else who's impartial doing that.
Yeah.
We have our procedures of when certain things happen, and somebody else is looking after that. Mm-hmm. For a small business or a new business, you don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
But you will be able to outsource that.
I think that's when it's quite hard. And I know we did actually outsource our credit control.
Yes.
And the interesting thing was using somebody outsourced, we actually found the sales went up as well.
Okay.
Because she rang sort of 10 days after something was delivered and said, are you happy with everything and you'd be okay to pay, when are you thinking you'll be able to pay this bill and things. And then she would ring them up when they said they were going to pay. Rather than but often they would say, oh yeah, actually I need some letterheads as well. So that was quite good.
So that's quite interesting, that not only are you not upsetting the customer, you're actually getting more business from it.
So is that something that you actually as a company provide as well, that service?
Not the debt collection side, but I know there are people that do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's certainly possible to outsource that.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you can afford to do it, and it might not cost very much, you can then maintain that relationship with your customer client and have that completely sorted by somebody else.
Yeah.
And that helps. But the other thing to think is, if you're worried about upsetting your customer, if they're not actually paying for the work that you're doing for them, do you really want them as a customer?
Yeah, and it's like it's not business if you're not getting paid for it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now that is hard. I think particularly in early days, you maybe don't have a big customer base. You might not want to take that risk.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it is difficult, but it is a way to look at it.
Yeah, and I think too, it's people expect to pay for what they've had. So quite often they haven't paid either because the invoices got lost, which is another problem. Don't people sometimes jump to the conclusion, oh, they're not going to pay because they haven't got the money, or they're not paying because they're not happy, or they're just not paying because they're trying to swindle me. It might be they're not paying because they haven't had the invoice, or that they thought it had been paid and it hasn't, or whatever. But what about if you send out your statement, you send out your reminder? I mean, how often would you chase things? So say you haven't been paid
Yeah, I
on
think
30 days or whatever your date is.
Yeah, I think you're right. There could be a good reason why somebody hasn't paid. And the first thing is really to have that conversation. Not to be afraid to ring, because other people will be doing it.
Yeah.
Everybody will need to get their money in, so they'll be used to these phone calls. And it can be a very friendly approach as well to begin with. Just ringing to check that you got your invoice okay, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because then straight away they'd say, oh, actually, I usually say, well, you're usually really good to pay, so I was surprised that I didn't have.
So you can approach it in a pleasant way. You're not immediately confrontational.
Yeah.
Give them a chance to say why they haven't paid.
Yeah.
But assuming that they have got the invoice and haven't paid, you then need to have that. So, when can I expect payment from you? Type of conversation. And I think to try and get them to commit to how they're going to pay this bill. So, you may find they'll say, I haven't got it all now, but I can pay you half. Or is it okay if I pay some this month and some next month?
Yeah.
Whatever it may be, because people may generally not be able to pay at that moment in time.
Yeah.
But try and get some sort of commitment from them and have a record yourself of what they've said to you.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing, to remember to record it down, and as you're saying, put a note in your diary to ring back in a week's time or something.
Because if you're just ringing and they're just fobbing you off, and then you have to ring them again a week later or whatever, and a week later, and they just keep fobbing you off, that can go on forever.
So what can you do when you get into that sort of situation where you ring and then they're not taking your calls, or they're not answering emails, or what happens?
Yeah, I mean, there are companies who will try and recover the debts for you, or it is possible to take your unpaid debts to the small claims court, which is the approach we use.
Mm-hmm.
Without involving a third party.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing we'll do is to write a fairly pleasant sort of friendly letter. And I think, Nancy, you have a
So,
copy of
yeah,
that.
I'll just bring that up.
You might be able to show everyone. So what that does is basically say, this is still outstanding.
Is that big enough there? Can you see okay?
That's fine with me. I can see that fine.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is there a problem, first of all? If there's a reason why you haven't paid this bill, would you please just get in touch and explain to us what the issue is, and we'll come to some sort of agreement on payment. We also sort of say how people can pay, so to re-emphasize the different ways in which we'll accept payment, to give people those options. And then we'll say, please reply within 10 days with the payment or with some agreement, or ring us to make an agreement. So that gives them a deadline for when we're expecting a reply,
Mm-hmm.
when we're expecting payment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's saying 10 days in our case. You can put whatever you want in that. We'll say we'd like payment within 10 days.
I suppose you need to give them kind of a reasonable amount of time, sort of 7 days, or so you can't sort of say if you don't pay by tomorrow, then...
That's right, yes. Yeah. I mean, they may be on holiday or something, not get the letter. Yeah. So we do that, and then we find that tends to get quite a lot of money in just by doing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't, you can see there on the screen now the follow-up letter.
Mm-hmm.
What I would always say is if you've given them 10 days and they haven't responded, is to follow it up.
And would you do that on email, or would you do that in the post?
We would send it out in the post,
mm-hmm.
and we'd also send it to be signed for.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you'd send it by signed for,
signed for service,
mm-hmm.
because that means that if you do need to follow it up with the second letter there, you can prove that they've had the first letter.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to deny that it ever was sent to them. So what that second letter is saying is, we're disappointed you haven't replied to our letter. So we're now going to go through the county court, small claims court process.
And would you always do that, or would it depend on the amount?
I guess you would have a minimum amount that you may not bother doing that for, but it would be unlikely for our sort of business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's kind of, you don't want to get into the habit. What about if you the person's gone bankrupt or something like that? Is there any point still pursuing it through the court?
I would say not. Mm-hmm. That's probably something more for a solicitor, perhaps, or a debt collection person. Yeah. But no, if you're not going to get the money, don't waste everybody's time.
Mm-hmm. So that's really been helpful, and I'm sure people will find that interesting. Is there any other tips or anything you want to kind of talk about what you do as an accountant firm to help people with this?
I think one of the things is perhaps appreciating the importance of cash and regularly reviewing people's cash flow. Mm-hmm. So even before you start, you might have some sort of business plan, or it's worth having sort of business plan to take into account how you're going to pay your bills. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then to make sure that you're always going to be able to do that. So being sort of conscious, if you like, of that cash flow right from the start.
Mm-hmm. So that's something that you would talk people before they even start businesses, is talk to them about, you might not have much business for the first couple of weeks. So that's a service you provide. That's excellent.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the actual getting the cash in, outsourcing could be very helpful for some people. And there are people out there who will do debt collection. Mm-hmm. That's important too. You need to be always aware of what's in your bank. It often surprises me when people don't know how they can run a business when they don't even know what the bank balance is. Mm-hmm. And I think with technology now, that's so much easier.
Yeah, and also knowing what's going to come out in the next couple of weeks and things.
Looking ahead all the time. But if you're using zero or stage one, you get information, or you can have that set up so the information in the bank directly feeds into your accounts package.
Mm-hmm. So do you help? So you would also help people kind of setting this up if they were starting business or they wanted help with that. You do that as well.
Yes, that's right. We will help them to look at the packages and they decide which one they would like, and we can help them with the initial setup and with ongoing training.
Mm-hmm. And so that helps as well with it makes it easier for you, so it makes it less expensive for people in the long run, I would think, if they have it all.
Exactly right. In the terms of the work we have to do, that will dictate how much they will need to pay us.
Yeah.
The more they do, the less they have to pay us.
Yeah. And it helps them get a much better handle on their business if they spend that money and time getting it right first, doesn't it?
That's right, yes. And that's another reason we offer an initial appointment free. Because often a new business will come to us, or somebody about to set up, and they don't have much by way of funds to start with.
Mm-hmm.
If they have a free initial hour with us, it gets them off on the right foot.
Yeah,
and the computer packages.
And it also helps them kind of work out, that this is a good fit and this is somebody I can trust and things like that. So that's a useful thing for people to remember. What about if a company's not really, they've been in business a while, but they feel they need a bit more proactive accountant? Do you offer the same offer to them as well?
Yes, what we'll do is we tend to build relationships with people and we work with them for years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Quite a lot will start off small and the business will grow and the needs will change. So we have a wide range of services, and where people fit is into the business and what they want from us.
Mm-hmm.
Some people in the start will say, would you look after doing my payroll? Will you do my VAT returns for me? Because they are concerned that they don't know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
As business grows, they might be able to take on a bookkeeper to do that sort of work.
Mm-hmm. And then
or even an accountant. Or they might ask us to go monthly or to look at their online accounts once a month just to check that everything looks as it should.
So you're very flexible.
That kind of thing. Yeah, so that's really, as the relationship grows, what the person wants from us.
Well, super. So thank you very much, Jill. Do you have a business card or something you can hold up to the screen with your
I can manage that.
with your details? So that you can get all of that.
Right, so I'll try to do that. Hopefully this will work.
Yeah. That's great. So it's Alan Sykes, Jill Hindmarsh, and it's 01388 777 877, or Jill Hindmarsh at alansykes.co.uk. That's great. Thank you, Jill. So thank you. I'm just going to stop the recording. That's fantastic. And many thanks for all those great tips.